Hi, good evening. Welcome to Denver Water's second virtual community meeting of the year. Tonight's focus is going to be on construction preparedness. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our translator, Nicholas. I'm going to invite him on. So for any of our Spanish speakers, he will be able to give instructions on how to join that meeting in Spanish. Nicholas?
Buenas tardes, buenas noches con todos y todas. ¿Cómo están? Si necesitan o quieren escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor aplastar asterisco 3 si están en su teléfono para poder escuchar esta reunión en español. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Nicholas. Hi again, I'm Mickey Bain. I'm going to be facilitating the meeting this evening, and you've received an invitation to this call because your neighborhood is slated to receive lead service line replacements in 2023. Our goal is to prepare you for that lead service line replacement and give you an idea of what to expect before, during, and after the construction process. And tonight, an opportunity for us to hear from you as well. If you're joining us by phone and you'd like to join online, you can go to denverwater.org/lead. You'll see a blue bar at the top. You'll be able to join the meeting online. If you are on the phone, don't worry. You will be able to fully participate in the meeting via the phone as well. Before we get started, we're going to go over the agenda. So we're going to kick things off with a high-level overview of the lead service line replacement. We're going to get into what to expect during the service line replacement, so before, during, and after construction. And then we're going to finish off with some questions and answers. We'll be able to hear from you. And we'll finish everything off with some action steps to make the process go as smooth as possible. Some guidelines before we begin. We want to respect everyone on the call. We appreciate everyone's time for joining us. We do know we're going to have some very diverse perspectives. We would like to stay on topic and through the agenda. We're aware there could be questions on water quality testing or filters. All that information can be found on our website at denverwater.org/lead. We also have previous meetings just like this recorded that cover those topics. We're going to participate in some polls. We'll give you guys instructions to do that. We'd like to know who's going to be joining us. And then we're going to have some time for our questions and comments. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Specific questions about properties and timelines we'll cover later on in the presentation around slide 8, so you'll get a better understanding of the timeline. For our questions, all you need to do is press *3. If you're on the phone, that will take you to the question queue. You can still participate in the full meeting while that's going on. And for those of you that are online, you can just use the comment box on the screen. And tonight, joining me, I'll have some fellow Denver Water teammates, Pam Williams and Aria Alvarado. So before we talk at you guys anymore, we want to get an idea of who's joining us. So for our first poll question, which response best describes you? Press 1 for I own my own home, 2 for I rent my home, 3 for I own my home and additional properties that I rent out. So once again, while we're getting some of those results back, what response best describes you? 1, I own my home, 2, I rent my home, or 3, I own my home and additional properties that I rent out. So great, we're seeing results come in. We see a lot of folks that own their home, quite a few that have some additional rental properties, as well as some renters. The nice thing with this is that everything in this presentation will be applicable if you own your home, if you rent a home, or if you have multiple properties. Now that we've got a good idea of who's joining us on the call, I'd like to pass it over to my partner, Aria, who will give you an overview of customer-owned service lines.
Thanks, Mickey. So water meters, water mains, service lines, it can all be a little bit confusing, and we know that you're not the expert. So we want to ground you a little bit and just kind of explain what all of that is. So the Water main is the pipe that runs along the street, and the service line is the pipe that actually breaks off and feeds each property. The customer-owned lead service line are the pipes that we are focusing on removing with our lead reduction program, and that is what feeds the home with water. Replacing these service lines is the heart of the lead reduction program, and it is the primary source of lead in drinking water. Next slide, please. So this slide is going to show you the number of estimated lead service lines within our service area. And the reason that there is a range of numbers is because Denver Water does not own the service lines. They are actually owned by the property owner. Therefore, we don't have records of work that has been done, whether it's been repaired or replaced in the past, or what was originally installed at the property. So far, since 2020, we have replaced over 15,000 lead service lines as part of the lead reduction program. And there's two ways that your service line can be replaced. So through our lead reduction program, which is typically led through our contractors, or when discovered through our routine maintenance or pipe replacement jobs, which is typically led by Denver Water crews. Prior to the lead reduction program, Denver Water has been replacing these lead service lines for the last few years while they were discovered during the course of our regular routine maintenance, our pipe replacements, and those kinds of things. They were also replaced as property owners chose to redevelop their properties or do a scrape off and rebuild. There are about 1,200 lead service lines replaced every year through these efforts, which, if we continued at that pace, would take several decades to replace all of these service lines. Through the lead reduction program, which we began in 2020, we're accelerating the pace of the replacement of these service lines at no cost to the property owner. And rather than taking several decades to complete this work, we expect it to take 15 years. Federal funding, we did receive that at the end of last year, which is going to nearly double the amount we replaced this year in 2023, which will accelerate the rate of the lead reduction program. Okay, so where are we going to be working? Where are we going to be replacing these service lines? We're going to be working in these areas you see on our map here. This map is on our website at denverwater.org/pipes. And customers can actually enter their address into our inventory map, and they can figure out if they have a lead service line, and they can also see what contractors are working in their area and the relevant dates if it is available. So again, denverwater.org, you can search for pipes, you can search for lead, or denverwater.org/pipes directly. So now that you have an overview of what we mean by replacing these lead service lines, I'm going to turn it over to Pam, who's going to walk you through the notification process and what you can actually expect before construction.
Thanks, Aria. So what we're looking at here is a little timeline that we've put together for you. And there's really a lot of pieces to it, which, some of you may be thinking that already or have some of those questions and maybe even feeling excited. So when are you coming to me? And I've signed my form, and when is my turn? So it's really hard sometimes for us to narrow that in really precisely. We have different contractors we're working with, our own Denver Water crews. So we're going to go through now kind of those key points and in some slides momentarily of some of those finite details as well. And really walk you through the step-by-step on what to expect leading up to construction and how you'll ultimately schedule that line replacement. So step one, some properties are going to receive a postcard in the mail that lets them know they'll be getting a water test kit in the mail. And we'll go over more about those tests in the next slide. Next, step two, if we need you to complete a water test kit, we'll send you the kit a couple of weeks after the postcard. So really the postcard is the heads up. There's going to be something coming to your doorstep if you weren't expecting a delivery, and then that kit arrives. And not all customers will actually receive a lead test kit. Really honing in here, I know we kind of asked who's in the audience, but really a note here is that only single family residences are going to be getting those test kits. And really that's due to the nature of the sampling collection and the details surrounding that. Step three, when we identify your property for upcoming replacement, we'll mail a packet that includes a booklet overviewing the service line replacement process and a consent form. And that consent form is really important, and we'll talk about that more in the next slides. I know I keep saying that, but this is really giving you an overview of those things, and we'll fine-tune those details. And the consent form is really, as a property owner, you saying, yes, I want to do this. Please replace my service line. And that's why that's important, because we need that consent from you. The next step will be tracking you down actually to try to get that consent form signed, because we really want you to do this work. It's of great value to you, looking at for public health and safety and all the good reasons that we want to get the lead service line out of the ground. So it may be a case where we mail that mailer to you and you're on the ball and you got it in, but all of a sudden another one shows up in the mail. It could just be a timing issue with the mail and for us it getting into us, it getting processed. So really the reminder here is and thing to tell you is expect at least one reminder mailing. So we really do want to make sure that we're finding everybody and getting those consents in. And we may also have our construction team knock on your door or do a follow-up call or email if we haven't received that form back. So again, you could receive those reminders, you've already mailed it in, or it's a great reminder for you because if you're like me and juggling a lot of things happening in your life, maybe serves as a reminder to say, oh yeah, I put that over here. I'm glad that Denver Water sent me that reminder because I need to send that back in. So once you sign that consent form, the construction team will actually reach out to schedule an in-home consultation to talk about the replacement and any details specific to your property. And after the in-home consultation, the last step showing here, it'll be time to schedule the replacement. And we'll talk more about that momentarily. And how does that happen? How do I get on the schedule? More details to come. So moving over to our next slide, looking at what to expect continued before that replacement. Investigations. So before we show up at your house, there are likely things we have already asked you to do, or you may even start to see field crews mobilize nearby. You may see the equipment coming in or crews out there, walking the area, trying to get a lay of the land. And really also what we're doing during that time is conducting investigations of the water service line outside. We call that potholing prior to the replacement to confirm there is lead. Because we have a suspicion there's lead based on your property's tap at our main in the street or how old your property is, but we don't know for certain what's happened between pre-1950 and today, 2023. And those potholes are about the size of a small dinner plate. And we're going to dig down into the dirt and look for that material, that service line. And there's no action required by the customer for potholing as we prepare those investigations. Things that you may also see crews doing are conducting utility markings and putting up no parking signs on the street as part of this work. We want to make sure that we're looking under the ground in the street. Many of those locations may be where a car is parked on the street, especially in the city, along city streets. As many of you may be experiencing, you may not have a garage or street parking is where you're parking, your neighbors park. So those are the reasons that we're putting up those signs and asking folks to move cars while we're conducting that work. As I mentioned before, we may send you a water test kit in the mail, and that test is free and includes in there directions on how to collect those samples and return them for analysis and where to return them and how to do that. And then the last couple pieces for the before and the inspections piece, we'll do an interior investigation check to check the material of the line coming into your house. So we're looking outside at the material with the potholes, as I mentioned, and then looking at the line to see what does it look like coming into the property. And then on our next slide, we're going to get into more of those details that I mentioned that's going to happen during the in-home visit and that consultation with the contractor. Okay, so next slide. In order for us and our contractors to move forward with your replacement, we need to gain your written consent. So you heard me say a little bit ago, we mail that consent form, we may mail it a couple of times, and we really need that back from you. And to provide your consent, Denver Water will send you that form so that you can review it and you can send it back in the mail. You can also find it online, denverwater.org/consent, CONSENT. And on that mailed form, there's even a handy dandy QR code if you just want to scan on your phone, iPad, whatever device you may have. If you receive that form and you're a renter and you're maybe at the property, you're not the homeowner, what we're really asking you to do is contact Denver Water Customer Care with the name and contact information of your landlord or the property owner. And that number is 303-893-2444. And the reason for that is because we need the consent from the property owner to replace that lead service line. There may be some time, it could be weeks actually, between signing your form and hearing from us about next steps. And that's okay and normal. So don't worry if you're in that scenario now. The folks that we've invited to this call, we may have already sent that form to you. You may have even sent it back to us. And we typically send those forms out a couple of months in advance of the work. And the reason we do that is because it gives us time to process all those forms we're getting back, which is hundreds of them, and prepping for the work. And once we get those in, then contractors know for sure who has said yes and when they're going. It takes a lot of time and coordination for that. So rest assured, we don't want to leave any lead service lines behind. And if you've said yes, we're going to know that. So after we receive your consent form, the next step is that in-home visit and property walkthrough with the construction team. So the team's going to reach out to the contact listed on that consent form to set up that in-home visit. So again, that consent form, very important to fill it out with who's the best contact, who will be at the property. And that occurs about a month or so before construction begins in the area, that in-home visit time period. If your consent is gained in person during the door knocking, maybe you forgot to mail, we've mailed a couple times and here we are, we're in the area, we knocked on your door, you happen to be home, you're like, oh, great. And we're going to try to just ask at that time, hey, do you have some time here, 30 minutes less, whatever that time period might be. And the crews will ask you that and try to complete that in-home visit there on the spot. So you're seeing some logos there if you're online looking at the screen, and really we're going to dive in into the details of safety and security. Just wanting to provide a few details on that. And, we've heard news stories and we even hear from our customers today about utility impersonation. And we recognize that letting a stranger into your home is not an easy thing to do. So, you may not be expecting that door knocking, or you're seeing crews or construction in the area and you're like, what are people doing out here? And we do have a number of contractors doing those replacement in addition to our own Denver Water crews. So those logos that you're seeing there, and they're on our website, those are the logos of our contractors that we're working with. And for those of you on the phone, those contractors are AGL Construction, 5 Star Energy Services, KR Swerdfeger Construction, and Apex Plumbing. Another thing that you can look for and ask crews if they're in the area or at your door is for a Denver Water badge. We're looking for those logos and the names of those contractor companies on trucks, hard hats, badge, if it's not Denver Water, but the badge of the contractor, they should have those. You should also carry a business card that has our number to our customer care line. And customer care can verify that work if you'd like. We have customers call us all the time and say, I just really want to make sure they are who they say they are. And that's okay if you want to do that. And we want to make sure that you feel comfortable. And the last piece I'll mention, you can use our interactive map on our website to look at where we're doing work. And if you hover over where your house is or in that area, it'll show you who that contractor is that's doing that work. So another place you can double check that. As I mentioned before, the service line replacement it's going to be Denver Water or one of our contractors that will meet with you in home for that inspection. So we'll identify where the service line enters your property during that in-home visit. Typically, it's in a basement, in your crawl space, and we'll also look where your water meter is outside. Typically, you'll see that outside near the street, the sidewalk, tree lawn, right-of-way area. So we're going to replace that service line. We'll need a clear pathway to both of those locations because that's where we're going to be getting that old line out and putting that new line in. During that in-home visit, those contractors are also going to go over what's going to be impacted. What about my trees or my flowers, the landscaping that I have? What about the drywall on the inside of where it's coming into the basement? All those different fine details. And they're going to walk through what that's going to look like and what to expect during the process. And also during that, they're going to talk about the restoration piece and what is going to be their responsibility as the crew or the contractor, and what's going to be the responsibility of Denver Water, and what will be your responsibility as the homeowner. And once that in-home visit has been completed, then we'll move on to scheduling the service line replacement. I know that was a lot of details that I was getting there, and we will be having a time here coming up to answer some questions here shortly. Okay, so moving on. So some more before the replacement. So going back a little bit, the consent form signed, and now you're ready to get your service line scheduled for replacement. So the Denver Water's contractors, the ones I mentioned earlier, just a moment ago, they're going to reach out to the contact listed on that consent form. We talked about that being the contact for that in-home visit. That's also going to be the contact for scheduling the replacement. So once they reach out, then they're going to schedule that replacement a few weeks in advance. It's not going to be the day before. And rest assured, you'll have time to figure out, what's my schedule? It's summertime, maybe I'm out of town. So they're really going to work with you on that scheduling piece. They each set up their schedules slightly different from one another, but you will get that advance notice so that you can find a date that works best. Now, if your service line's being replaced as part of Denver Water's routine maintenance project, that's where we're replacing the big pipe and the main in the street. That's going to be our Denver Water crews doing that work. And they're going to leave a door hanger on your door with contact information so you know who to call in to schedule your replacement with them. It's a little bit of a different process. We have different things going on. Overall, just wanting to get the lead out. The really important key thing is all those instructions are on those materials we send. If you get a door hanger, be sure to read it. I know sometimes information can be overwhelming, but some of those key pieces and instructions are in there. So if you see that door hanger on your front door asking you to contact us, it really is a critical step to make sure you get on the schedule. And then a couple more little tips here, not forgetting that it has to be someone over the age of 18 that needs to stay at the property during the full time of replacement, and keeping that important piece of information in mind when scheduling your replacement. So think about a day when someone can be there all day. If it's a day that maybe it's iffy, you have some appointments going on, maybe that's not the best day, because we really want to make sure someone's there if things arise, letting you know about water turning off and on, going through the checklist of things when the replacement's finished. And in order for Denver Water crews or our contractors to be able to schedule that replacement, we of course have to have your correct information and current information on file. So maybe the way that you get your bill or that you interact with Denver Water is different than maybe the phone number or email that you use that you need someone to contact you immediately or to schedule. Maybe that's the information you're putting on. So making sure that the best and current and correct information is what you're putting in that consent form and on file with us. That was a lot of me talking, and hopefully I'm going slow enough for everybody or interpretation as well. I'm going to send it back over to Mickey so we can get in a few questions now.
Thank you, Pam and Aria, for that overview. I also want to say thank you to everyone joining us. We are going to get into some questions here in the moment. If you are on the phone and you'd like to ask a question, please remember that's going to be *3. And online, you can just use the comment box for your questions as well. One thing I would like to point out that this meeting is being recorded as well as all of our other previous meetings. So if you are to go to denverwater.org/lead, you'll be able to see this recording probably within the next 48 hours, so you can come back and reference. So let's get into some questions. First question came in online. It looks like Elliot and Laura Fay are curious to know the definition of a service line, if it's going to be main to meter or meter to home. I think that's a great question. Pam, could you go ahead and answer that for us?
I sure can, and thank you for that question. It is a common one, and I know when I started working at Denver Water, that's something that I learned myself, so it is a good question. So when we speak about the service line, we're talking about the main in the street at the starting point, and then their tap, and then all the way up to the house, to the property. So between the main and that meter we're replacing, and between the meter and the house. So when we say the service line, we're talking about that whole portion that we're replacing. That service line is customer owned. So for you that are on the call that are the homeowner, property owners, that is your service line, technically speaking. But Denver Water, we are replacing that entire portion of that water service line from the main, the tap in the street, all the way up, pulling into the first fitting of the house.
Thank you for that, Pam. Another online question that's come in is Nathan Stone. He had signed a consent form several years ago. Work wasn't completed at the time, and he can't find a copy of that. Aria, can you explain what we do in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Valid question. A few years ago, I would have probably lost it too. So your best bet, go to denverwater.org/consent, and you can fill it out on there. You don't even have to handwrite it and snail mail it back. You can do it online there. If that is not something you have access to, please feel free to call our customer care department at 303-893-2444, and they can work with us to get something in the mail to you so you can get that signed and sent back to us.
Thank you, Aria. Sergio Castillo is curious. This is a common question we get often, so it's nice to tackle. What about the rest of the lines in the house? Pam, do you want to go ahead and take that one?
Yes, good question as well. Also comes up a lot, so I'm glad these are getting asked. So Denver Water is not replacing those service lines inside the property. So as I just mentioned a moment ago, we're looking at the water service line outside of the property from the main into the first fitting inside the home. Now, as you may know, and probably where your question's going is lead service lines were outside, but the plumbing inside those homes may still be lead or have lead containing components. And so that is going to be up to the responsibility of the property owner to do internal plumbing, faucets, fixtures, all of those things. And we do have some resources that you can find on our website and, get different, whatever your financial situation is. There's a couple of resources we have on there that we give to customers as well.
Thank you. And thank you, folks, for the excellent questions. We'll have some time later on to get into another Q&A session. But for right now that we've covered the big picture details of what to expect leading up to the replacement, we'd like to provide more insight on what to expect during the actual service line replacement. Pam, can you tell us more about what customers should expect during the service line replacement?
Yes. So what I'm actually going to do and not talk for a little while is share a short video with you all that provides a good overview of what to expect during the actual lead service line replacement. So this will provide the details such as when to move your car and what different techniques we're using, how are we getting that line out. It has a really great narrative for you that are on the phone, and we're going to be starting that here shortly.
There are 3 important things you'll need to know on the day of your service line replacement. First, your water service will be turned off for up to 8 hours, so please plan accordingly. Second, the property owner or a designee who is 18 or older must be on site the entire time. Third, portions of your street will be closed from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., so you'll need to move your vehicles in the morning to give construction crews room to park. And remember, we may be doing several service line replacements on the same street, so construction equipment could be in your neighborhood for a few weeks. Service line replacement starts by using an excavator to dig a hole in the street. Crews will then use shovels to dig down to reach the water main. This is to locate where the old lead service line connects to the water main. We'll also dig a second hole around the water meter in your yard. This is another access point to reach the service line. Crews will then go inside your house. We'll use a side entrance or back door if possible, and put down a cover to protect the floor. The pull-through technique is a common method to replace a lead service line. This involves disconnecting the old service line from the water main in the street. And then inside your house, crews will detach the service line from where it connects to your home's plumbing. We'll then feed a cable through the old service line and attach it to a coil of new copper pipe. The next step involves using an excavator on the street. The machine pulls the cable and the old lead service line through the ground. The new copper service line gets pulled through with it. Then workers connect the new copper line to the water main. In the directional boring technique, the old lead service line is left in the ground and abandoned. Crews will disconnect it from the water main and your home's plumbing so it can no longer be used. We'll then bring in a boring machine and park it on the edge of the property. Workers use this machine to bore a hole for the new service line. The boring machine drills until it reaches a designated location in the basement or crawl space. Crews attach the new copper service line to the drill and pull it back through the hole. Workers then connect the new line to the water main. We'll check all new connections to make sure they're secure. These techniques avoid having to dig a trench through your yard. However, there are some rare cases when digging a trench is required. The final step of the replacement process involves connecting the new copper service line to your indoor plumbing, and then sending water through the new pipe to your home. If your water meter was located inside your house, it will most likely be moved outside during construction. This will make it easier for us to access in the future.
Okay, for those of you that are listening in on the English line, our Spanish version of this video is just about a minute longer. So we're going to hang tight here and wait for that. And I just want to remind folks that we will have another spot coming up here in a bit for more questions. So if we haven't gotten to yours yet, hopefully we will be doing that soon. And I think we probably have about 30 seconds until our other folks can join back in on the Spanish line. Okay, I think we're wrapping up on that minute. Got about another second now, so I'm gonna move forward. Okay, so I also have some additional tips to share with you to help that lead service line replacement day go smoothly. So completing morning routines like showering, cooking, filling water bottles or pitchers, doing a few dishes, any laundry really quick prior to that water shut off. So as you saw there and was mentioned in the video, the water will need to be shut off for periods of time here and there during that replacement. Don't plan to use hot water, ice maker, sprinkler systems, or water-related appliances during the outage. So when the crew says, we're turning the water off, don't use any of those. We don't want anything happening and really want to give you the best tips possible. And then they'll be coming back and letting you know when that water's back on. And turning your cold water on periodically during that time frame to check for running water, that's okay. If anyone is anything like myself, I get impatient sometimes, so I may want to check that water. So although we don't encourage you to do that, it's okay just to check it periodically if you want to or need to, just the cold water side of that. I know one question that did come in, I saw on our side here, just to squeeze that in. Someone had asked if we plan to do all of the houses at once or if we come back multiple times. So as I mentioned before, we send those consent forms way in advance to figure out who has said yes to us so we can set up all the things ahead of time and get the schedules going. So the contractors and our crews really try their best to get as many of those yeses and schedules that we're doing, an entire block or all the lead service lines on a block if possible before we're moving. And they move in a fashion, north to south, west to east, however they've set up their schedule. So we do try to do everyone there at once. There are times, however, where maybe the consent comes in late or they forgot or whatever the situation is. So it could be that we're coming back on your particular block, for example, a couple of weeks later or, one or two more times. And it could be because maybe the contractors are finishing up some work or maybe somebody has their schedule a little bit later after we've maybe moved down the block or over a street, but we're still there in the area. So hopefully that answers the question that maybe I saw in there. I wanted to squeeze that in. Last piece I want to mention here on the slide is we really understand construction work can be disruptive. There's a lot of pieces that are involved in that, and we all have busy lives. But it is important that I mentioned before, you don't leave your property during construction. We really need you to be home or whoever you've designated to be home during that day so that we can address any issues that arise because things do happen. Not that it happens frequently or all the time, but also the really important piece in my mind is we want to do a final walkthrough with you when the work is completed so that you're looking at the work that was done, what you'll be responsible for, and then the contractor getting a chance to go over what they'll be responsible for, which is a great segue and moving on to what to expect after service line replacement. So after watching the video describing the replacement, you may be wondering, or maybe before the video and coming into this call tonight, about how to deal with a hole or two in your front yard. Long story short is we'll take care of that. We aim to minimize those impacts. After the pipe replacement is done, we'll pour the dirt back into the hole in your yard and cover up that new water meter. And we're going to make sure that it's compacted in, it's at its original surface level, nice and even. And then after that, a landscaping crew is going to come back if needed and do additional restoration work. So that may include new sod or reseeding if it was grass that was impacted. Maybe it was rock or mulch that was in that area, putting back that rock and mulch that we've set aside and putting that back to how it was. And if irrigation lines are impacted, because sometimes that can happen, those will also be repaired. So I know it's getting hotter, folks are starting to water. So rest assured, that's really, again, just going back to what I said before, making sure walking through everything afterwards, and especially now that it's the warm season, maybe firing up those irrigation lines, taking a couple minutes just to have that walkthrough with the contractor or with the crew to double check if anything happened so that they can make note of that and coming back and repairing those. Again, the impacts will be discussed during that in-home visit as well. It's going to be way in advance also of your replacement. So maybe while the crews are in the area, they see some landscaping or specific plants close to where they'll be digging. They may mention to you, hey, if you want to salvage those and dig them up yourself before construction, put those aside and then put them back in when we're done. The contractor can identify those with you and be sure to do that as well. Moving into the interior of the home, so any impacts to the inside of the home, such as drywall or flooring that we may need to cut a piece out to get to the pipe where it comes into the house so we can pull that new line in, that's going to be the responsibility of the homeowner to restore. And that information is laid out in the information we sent you with that consent form and in that booklet. So be sure to look through that. And if you have questions on, well, where will that be in the drywall or my floor, be sure to be going over that in that in-home visit. Moving back outside to the street, crews will fill in the hole and put down a temporary patch so that the road is safe. And then a paving crew comes back later and does a permanent repair. And really to ensure the best results for everyone, the timing of that landscape restoration and street repair really depends on the work crew's schedule and the season. Of course, we're in warmer weather now, luckily, and that's really needed for asphalt. When we're doing this in colder season, sometime that can be delayed. But really that restoration, it may not happen the immediate next day. There is a method to the madness and the scheduling of that. So for the best results and getting that restoration done, but we will come back and be doing that. So the next slide we're going to talk about afterwards is the important step of flushing your pipes after replacement. And so not meaning flushing your toilet, but if you're on video or on the web, you can see there's a couple of pictures here showing a running faucet and a sink. And we're talking about flushing sinks and bathtubs, things like that. And the reason for that is because during that construction, it's possible for lead particles and other debris to get trapped in there. While you may not see that visibly, potentially, it can get in there. So it's really good to flush and get that out. And from a health perspective, it's really important because it can lead to temporarily higher levels of lead as well as other plumbing issues. So such an important step. And then I think I already mentioned, just looking at my little talking points here, we're not talking about toilets, of course. We're talking about faucets and sink to flush out, again, that residual debris and particles that are left behind. All right, so moving on to the next slide. Crews will do an interior flush of your pipes immediately following construction. So if you're on the web, there's a picture showing outside spigot of the house being flushed, and then again of an inside sink. So for the outside, they're definitely doing that, especially in the warm weather now. We're able to turn that on and flush that out. But the inside portion is so important. So you may be done and wanting us to move on for the day, but I can't reiterate that enough and how important that is. And the crews are going to do a brief flush of that internally, walking through the house with you. They'll do that interior flush where they'll run your faucet for maybe about 10 minutes or so. And in total, the process should take about 30 minutes. So while it seems long and maybe you're ready for us to leave, which is understandable, it's really important to have them stay and do that process with you. And then we also recommend that for about a month following the replacement, you just do a brief 5-minute flush when the water hasn't been used for several hours. So maybe if everybody's gone for the day, school or work, flushing it for a few minutes when you get home, or in the morning, people are waking up, showering, or whatever your schedule may be. And then the last piece about flushing, recommending that you regularly clean the aerators or the little screens on your faucet. If you're at home or wherever you are, or next time you get to a sink, look up underneath there and there's a little screen in there. That's your aerator. And those can just, in general, collect debris over time. And every time I do one of these meetings, it just reminds me that I need to do that at my own house. So that's one little piece there, and the aerator, and getting that out and cleaning it when you're doing those flushes as well. So now I'm going to pass it over to Aria to talk about and explain more steps you should take after replacement. So more of the after steps.
Thanks, Pam. So as Pam mentioned, there can be residual debris that's left after a service line replacement. So to avoid consuming any of those remaining lead particles, please, please, please continue to use your pitchers and filters provided by Denver Water for 6 months after the replacement process. Again, the lead service line is gone, but any of that residual debris can be in your internal plumbing. So we want to make sure that that is not being consumed. About 4 months after the replacement takes place, Denver Water will send you a letter to see if you would like to submit another water quality test kit. Now, the intent of this water quality test kit is to see if there are other sources of lead within your home. So if you're still getting a hit for lead, then that could be indicative that you might need to replace some of your plumbing or fixtures inside of the home. With that said, now we'll go back to Mickey and we're going to open it up for a Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you for those tips and tricks, Pam and Aria, the importance of the water quality test kits. We're going to turn it over for some more questions and answers. We've had some great ones come in. We're going to use the magic of technology. There's a caller, Debbie Ellert, who has some questions regarding water pressure. We're going to go ahead and bring that question on live.
The intent of this water quality test kit is to see if there are other sources of lead within your home. So if you're still getting
Debbie, can you hear us?
some of your plumbing or fixtures inside of the home. With that said, now
So not sure that works, but that's going to be showbiz. So we're going to go ahead and transition back to some online questions. One that we've seen multiple people come in with is asking what happens if they were to give consent and then something in the house may be problematic if they were able to revoke it. Pam, do you want to cover that?
Sure. Although we would be sad if you decided that because we want to get the lead out. You can do that, and I have seen that happen. So, if you mailed it in, if you want to remail one, that's a no. If you want to refill one out online, that's a no. Sometimes that can happen. I've seen people once they do the in-home visit and maybe go through some things and realize, I don't want to do this, or this may be a lot on my part. And, we really do want to try to work with you through that. But if that's just unfortunately not the case, you can do the consent form as well, either consenting or declining in person with our contractors or crews on their tablets.
Excellent. And then another common concern we've seen, especially on the topic of landscape restoration, is an online question regarding old large trees and how those are protected during the process. Aria, can you cover some of that information?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, in the city of Denver, especially, we've got a lot of old, larger trees, and you're not the only one who's concerned about those. And Denver Water definitely wants to make sure we're protecting the tree canopy as well. That said, there is a lot of conflict at times with where the service line is and where these trees are. So we have actually partnered with forestry to identify best practices in terms of actually cutting those tree roots. And at times we'll use what's called a vac truck or a vacuum truck that will actually suck up the mud or the dirt around the tree to avoid causing as much damage as possible to that tree. So again, we will work with forestry, or we will use some other best practices to ensure that we are doing our best to make sure that that isn't affected by the work.
Thank you. And we have previously tried to bring a caller live to ask the question, but their question concerned water pressure during this and during and after. Is water pressure going to be affected by the service line replacement?
Also a really great question. I think a lot of people wonder if they'll see a benefit from that. And generally speaking, the answer is it's very possible. With a lead service line, typically what happens is there's a mineral buildup that happens within the pipe, and it eventually causes that pipe to get a little bit constricted. You think about like clogged arteries, it's kind of the same concept where there's not as much flow or as much water allowed to move through that pipe at any given time. So when we replace that with a new service line, all of a sudden there's more flow coming through that pipe. And a lot of people will see what they think is an increased pressure or an increased flow to the property.
Great. Thank you so much for that. A couple of questions we've seen online are regarding water quality test kit results. Some are saying low or there's no result. Pam, can you cover in terms of the investigation process if they'll still need a pothole to verify?
Yes, of course. So we really want to make sure there's no lead there. And we do a variety of ways, tests, of course, that we're talking about, and those potholes. Just the tests alone won't get somebody out of the program. Our program, we're reporting a lot of metrics to the regulators, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, and Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. But long story short, there may be potholes also required and likely will be between the main and meter portion of the street and the meter and the house portion, like in the right of way or somewhere in the yard. And it's that smaller hole. If things work out well, which what would be great is if we found copper, which is the other material, which is the plumbing standard now that we're replacing with, if we found that in those potholes, combined with doing an interior of double checking that interior is copper and that water quality or that water test and those results, then likely we would be able to remove that property from the program. So long and short of it, water test alone showing no lead, unfortunately would not get somebody fully removed from the program.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. We do have some questions still coming in on the phone, so we're going to try to get a caller on the screen here. We've got a Dirk Beck. He is located in an area that's scheduled for work to be done, and he's wondering if he can increase his service line. So let's get the details on that. Dirk, we're going to bring you online. Hi, Dirk. Can you hear us?
I'm here. Can you hear? I can
Yes.
hear you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Great. Yeah. So I just had a question. We're very early in the stages of potentially adding an accessory dwelling unit, and it's been identified that our service line isn't sufficient. We're probably behind identifying that exactly when it's going to happen, but if there is a chance that we're going to need to upgrade our service line, are we able to kind of future-proof it and request and maybe pay additional to have an additional size if we can kind of coordinate what the needs are going to be in the future at that time?
Great question, Dirk. I'm going to turn that over to Aria for the answer.
Oh, Aria, can't hear you for a second.
I had to do it. Someone had to do it.
There she
I'm
is.
sorry, my dogs were barking. Sorry, Dirk. That's a valid question. I'm glad that you are planning ahead and you are, thinking through this. So that does come up, especially with the ADUs being a more recent thing. And the answer is yes, we do have the ability to work with you on that. Depending on what your current service line size is, it will naturally be upgraded to at least a 3/4 inch, which surprisingly may be sufficient for an ADU. If that's not in fact the case, it's possible that we can actually upgrade that even further. So the best bet would probably be to talk to our water sales department, and they can figure out kind of based on how many fixtures you'll have in the property and that type of thing if an upgrade is necessary, and then work through what, if any, fees would be associated with that.
Thank you, Aria. And one thing, we have a tendency to use internal lingo and jargon. So, Ham, if you could go ahead and kind of clarify what you mean by what is potholing.
Sure. So it's a exterior inspection of that water service line outside. So it's our crews digging a hole, small dinner plate size. I'm not sure how many feet underground, and I should know this, but anyways, they're digging under the ground and they're uncut and they're sucking all that dirt out. It's typically a vacuum truck, kind of just looks like a big vacuum hose, frankly. And once they dig in there and they're sucking all that dirt out, and then they're shining a light down there and getting a visual of what that water service line material is made of. So we call it, I think, potholing, probably because it's maybe the size of a smallish pothole, but that does get filled back in. And what it is an exterior inspection of the service line by digging a small hole to look underground, get a picture and visual of what that service line material is made of. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you for going over that. And then we're going to kind of combine some questions because they're all very valid and they're all great things to think about. So what about trash pickup? We always should remember to do that. Should the dog be in daycare? What if they're out of town when the work occurs? Aria, do you want to kind of talk through some of those common scenarios?
Sure. So Denver Water and our contractors will do our best to make sure that things like trash pickup, deliveries, mail, all of that is still maintained. There may be some additional coordination required with those providers, but we will do our best to make sure that that is still business as usual. As far as dogs, I have 2 of them. You probably heard them barking. If your dogs are well behaved and you're able to keep them out of the way, I think that's fine. I think it's going to be a judgment call, right? We want to make sure that they're not going to be in the way of the crew, whether that's inside of the home or outside of the home. So use your judgment, but we definitely have worked around animals in the past. And as far as if you're out of town, depending on when the work is taking place, we will be in the area for a while and can typically work around that schedule. If that is a problem, then we can ask for a representative or a designee, somebody 18 or older, to be there. As long as we have the consent from the property owner, we can work with them as well.
Awesome. And to kind of finalize our Q&A section, we're going to cover consent forms a little more. So Pam, if you could talk about transferring it to a different homeowner or updating the phone number on the consent form, the process for that.
Sure. I will start with the updating contact information first. So your phone number changes, your email, by the time the consent form goes into now, no worries. I would say the best, quickest way would be reach out to Denver Water Customer Care. That phone number's 303-893-2444. You could email them. It's customercare@denverwater.org or lead@denverwater.org. And just give them those basics: your name, the updated contact information, your address. Hey, this is the better information. They have processes in place and things that we do in the background where they can then take that information and get it to the right people, who's working in that area, what contractor. There's a lot of administrative work, as you might imagine, that goes on in the background. So they know what those steps are to get those updated contacts over. And then switching over to new homeowner, it happens all the time. So typically what happens in a change of owner is typically through a title company, and Denver Water is usually notified that way. So not only are we updating at that point, maybe billing information, typical Denver Water billing things, but there's, again, more administrative and fun data things in the background where we're going to get that update and then be triggering out a new consent form. Sometimes things can be delayed. If you see we're in the area or you happen to know that or realizing that as a new homeowner before we're getting that sent to you, contact us again through customer care. Or if you're the person selling the home and you got this consent, but you didn't get it scheduled before maybe the new person's buying it, same thing. Have that new owner call in, get that information from our customer care team. Or the person could fill out that consent form online. So there's kind of a variety of things and ways that can happen. And then, like I mentioned, we do have mechanisms in place for that as well.
Thank you so much, Pam, for that. So now that we've covered the big picture details of the service line replacement from start to finish, we've been able to answer some of your questions. I'm going to pass it over to Aria to talk about action steps and what's going to come next, and she's going to preview those.
Thanks, Mickey. So just to recap and highlight what we've talked about today, there's some action items or homework, next steps that we would like to provide you. So first, if you receive a water quality test kit, whether that's before or after a replacement, please send that back to us. Again, after the replacement, we will send a letter to do that test, but please send those tests back to us. If you are the property owner, we absolutely need your consent to do this work. So please sign and return the consent form so that we can move forward with the replacement process. And again, that can be accessed online at denverwater.org/consent. If you are a tenant or renter, please reach out to your landlord or property owner and make sure that they're engaged with us and they're moving forward so that this work can get done and that you reap those benefits as well. And finally, please continue to use your filter and pitcher for added protection, as there could be that residual lead particulate after the replacement is done. So to bring us all home, I'm just going to wrap it up, and we want to encourage you to sign up for email updates. You can visit denverwater.org/lead, or you can reach out to us via email at lead@denverwater.org or via phone at 303-893-2444. And if you have a neighbor or a friend, family member who doesn't speak English, please encourage them to reach out to us. We have support and resources, information available about the lead reduction program in multiple languages, and we're eager to support everyone's participation in the program. As well as that, we have our website available in both English and Spanish specific to the lead reduction program. So again, denverwater.org/lead. And we thank you for your time this evening and look forward to working with you on the replacement process. So have a wonderful evening.